He served with honor, a decorated Marine haunted by war. But one night on a dark street, two cops saw only a target. The insults flew. The humiliation was public. They thought Harold Green was just another man to break. They were wrong. One bystander's video, one phone call, and now their careers are on fire. The coughing fits of Hal's ancient Ford sedan had been growing more persistent, like a death rattle he couldn't afford to silence. Tonight, it finally gave up the ghost, sputtering out on a tree-lined street where the houses sat back like feudal lords on their manicured estates. This was Northwood, a galaxy away from the cracked sidewalks and chain-link fences of his own neglected corner of the city. Hal sighed, the sound swallowed by the sudden quiet. Just his luck. Another tow, another bill he couldn't pay. He was bone-tired. The construction gig paid just enough to keep the lights on, barely. His small apartment, a fortress against the intrusive memories of Fallujah, felt more like a cage these days. PTSD was a relentless shadow, clinging to him, making sleep a battlefield and waking hours a tightrope walk over a chasm of anxiety. He ran a hand over his face, the calluses rough against his skin. He just wanted to get home, a flicker of blue and red in his rearview mirror. Hal's heart, already thrumming with a low-grade tension, kicked up a notch. Two patrol officers, their car gliding silently to a halt behind his. He took a slow, deliberate breath, the kind they taught you in the Corps to steady your aim, to steady your nerve. Cooperate, be polite, de-escalate. It was a mantra he'd learned wasn't just for combat zones. The first officer, a white man in his early 30s with a hard set to his jaw and eyes that seemed to be perpetually scanning for a threat, approached Hal's window. His name tag read Reed. The second, younger, with an Asian American face and a more hesitant posture, hung back slightly. Nguin. License and registration, Reed said, his voice flat, devoid of any preliminary greeting. The beam of his flashlight cut through the dim cab, dancing over Hal's face. Evening, officer, Hal replied, his voice calm, practiced. He reached slowly for the glove compartment. Car just died on me, waiting for a friend to give me a tow. A likely story, Reed drawled, his lips curling into a smirk. You look a little lost, pal. This ain't exactly your neck of the woods. Is it? Hal felt a familiar prickle of anger, hot and quick, but he tamped it down. He was a black man in a broken-down car in a wealthy, predominantly white suburb. He knew the script. He handed over his license and registration. His military ID was tucked in his wallet, a testament to a life of service he rarely spoke of anymore. Reed scrutinized the documents. Harold Green. Well, Harold, what's an old soldier like you doing out here? Looking like you're casing joints. Just trying to get home, officer, Hal said, keeping his tone even. The old soldier jab stung. He wasn't old, not really. Just worn down by things Reed couldn't begin to imagine. Or maybe looking for a handout? Reed pressed, his voice laced with contempt. Heard you types are good at that. Working the system. Welfare cheats, the lot of you. Hal's jaw tightened. He'd served his country for 12 years. He'd seen men die. He'd carried burdens Reed probably thought only existed in movies. Welfare cheat? The insult was a raw, open wound. His pride, already frayed, screamed for him to retaliate, to list his commendations, to demand respect. But he saw the glint in Reed's eyes, the hunger for a confrontation, for an excuse. No, officer, Hal said, his voice dangerously quiet. I work for a living. I served my country. I'm not looking for trouble. He chose his words carefully, offering his identification, his truth, without begging. He wouldn't give Reed the satisfaction of an argument. He just wanted this to be over. Nguin shifted uncomfortably behind Reed, his gaze flicking from Hal to his senior partner, a silent question in his eyes. Reed, however, seemed to enjoy the tension he was creating, like a cat playing with a cornered mouse. Step out of the vehicle, Mr. Green, Reed commanded, his voice taking on a sharper edge. The politeness, if it could even be called that, was gone. Hal's stomach clenched. Officer, is there a problem? My car broke down, that's all. The problem is I'm telling you to step out of the vehicle. Now. Reed's hand drifted towards his holstered weapon, a subtle but unmistakable gesture. Slowly, Hal opened the door and got out, his hands raised slightly in a placating gesture. He was wearing his old Marine utility jacket, faded and soft from years of wear, a small comfort against the evening chill and the rising tide of dread. "Hands on the hedge," Reed barked, gesturing towards the meticulously trimmed greenery bordering the lawn of a sprawling, multi-million-dollar home. The porch lights blazed, illuminating the scene like a stage. Hal felt a flush creep up his neck. He could see figures appearing in the windows of the house, silhouetted against the warm interior light. A dog started barking from a nearby yard. He pressed his hands against the rough, waxy leaves of the hedge, the scent of damp earth and privilege filling his nostrils. This was it. The degradation he'd always heard about, always feared, always tried to outrun with good behavior and quiet dignity. Reed began a pat-down, rough and impersonal. "What are you hiding, Green? Drugs? Weapons?" His voice was louder now, performing for an audience that was slowly beginning to gather on the sidewalk across the street. Hal could see the telltale glow of cell phone screens, recording. Each touch felt like a brand, searing shame into his skin. "I have nothing, officer," Hal said, his voice strained. He focused on a single leaf in front of him, trying to dissociate from the invasive hands, the leering eyes, the mounting humiliation. Inside his car, forgotten on the back seat, lay a small, unassuming box. It contained his Purple Heart, his Bronze Star, his discharge papers, symbols of sacrifice and honor, now irrelevant, unseen, as he was treated like common refuse. Reed found nothing but Hal's worn wallet and a set of keys. He threw them onto the hood of Hal's car with a dismissive clang. "Guess you're clean." This time, he and Nguin exchanged a few words, too low for Hal to hear. Then Reed turned back. "All right, Green, get your junker off our street. And stay out of Northwood." No apology, no explanation, just a dismissal, as if he were swatting away an annoying fly. Hal stood there, shaken, his hands trembling slightly as he retrieved his wallet and keys. The small crowd of onlookers across the street hadn't dispersed. Some were still filming, their faces indistinct in the gloom. He felt stripped bare, his uniform, once a symbol of pride now feeling like a costume in a humiliating play. He got back into his dead car, the silence inside deafening. The police car pulled away, its lights extinguished, leaving Hal alone in the deepening twilight, the echoes of Reed's insults and the weight of a dozen judging eyes pressing down on him. The engine, of course, wouldn't even turn over. He was stranded, not just by a broken-down car, but by a broken system. The video hit the internet by morning. Grainy, shot from across the street, but clear enough. Hal, a tall black man in a veteran's jacket, hands on a hedge in a rich neighborhood, officers looming over him. The audio was muffled, but you could hear the authoritative barks of Officer Reed. See Hal's stoic posture. The comments section exploded. "Abuse of power. Racial profiling. Is this how we treat our veterans?" Hashtag #NorthwoodPD_shame trended. Hal saw it when his friend, Marissa Clark, sent him the link with a simple, "Hal, you need to see this. And then you need to call me." Marissa was a force of nature, a community organizer with a voice that could rally a crowd and a heart big enough to hold the neighborhood's pain. She'd been Hal's rock since they met at a VA support group years ago. She for her brother who'd come back from Iraq a different man, he for himself. Watching the video was like reliving the humiliation frame by frame. His stomach churned. He closed the laptop, the image of himself vulnerable and exposed, burning behind his eyelids. He didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want to be the poster boy for police misconduct. He just wanted to forget. Meanwhile, at the Northwood Police Department, the viral video had landed like a grenade. Chief Miller, a man whose political aspirations were well known, was furious. An internal investigation was immediately launched into the conduct of Officers Reed and Nguin. Officer Ken Reed, 32, white, with a neatly trimmed military-style haircut and an unshakable belief in his own righteousness, was indignant. "We followed procedure," he told his union rep, his voice tight with resentment. The guy was suspicious, out of place. We checked him out. No harm, no foul. This is just another woke mob trying to crucify good cops. He was eyeing a sergeant's promotion, and this kind of PR nightmare was the last thing he needed. He was convinced if he just held the line, denied any wrongdoing, it would blow over. Officer Ben Nguin, 26, a second-generation Vietnamese American, wasn't so sure. He was a rookie, barely a year on the force. He'd grown up hearing stories from his parents about escaping a corrupt system, about the importance of justice and fairness. He'd joined the force to make a difference, to be one of the good guys. But standing by, watching Reed verbally abuse Hal Green, then roughly search him for no discernible reason, it hadn't felt right. He'd stayed silent, though. Fear of Reed, fear of jeopardizing his nascent career, fear of being seen as soft. It had all conspired to keep his mouth shut. Now, watching the video, seeing himself as a silent, complicit figure, a knot of shame tightened in his gut. Reed's insistence that they'd done nothing wrong rang hollow. He started to question not just Reed's actions, but his own inaction, his role in the humiliation. Hal finally answered Marissa's 10th call. "I don't want to talk about it, Rissa," he said, his voice flat. "Hal, honey, I know. But this is bigger than just you now," Marissa said gently but firmly. "People are outraged. This is a chance, a real chance, to make them listen, to make them see." "See what? Me getting treated like dirt? I've lived it, Rissa. I don't need to relive it on a loop." The trauma of the incident was reigniting his PTSD, the familiar tendrils of anxiety and hypervigilance wrapping around him. "No, Hal. To see that it happens. To people like you. To good men. To veterans. To black men. They need to see it, and they need to hear it from you." He was silent for a long moment. The thought of speaking out, of drawing more attention to himself, was terrifying. But the thought of letting Reed get away with it, of allowing that smug contempt to go unchallenged, that was starting to feel unbearable. "There's the Civilian Review Board, Hal," Marissa said a few days later, sitting across from him in his cramped living room, a sheaf of papers on the coffee table between them. "Independent. They have the power to investigate, to recommend disciplinary action. It's not perfect, but it's a start." Hal stared at the forms. Another bureaucracy, another system to navigate. He was tired of fighting. "What's the point, Rissa? They'll just cover for their own." "Maybe," Marissa conceded. "But we don't know until we try. And that video? It's leverage. Public pressure is a powerful thing, Hal. You served this country. You deserve to be treated with dignity. Not just by the military, but by every single person wearing a badge." Her eyes were fierce, her belief in him, in the possibility of justice, unwavering. He thought of his medals in the box. He thought of the sneer on Reed's face. He thought of the kids in his neighborhood who saw cops not as protectors, but as an occupying force. Maybe Marissa was right. Maybe silence was a kind of surrender. With Marissa's help, her hand steadying his as he filled out the complaint, Hal made the call. He detailed the incident, his voice quiet but firm, recounting Reed's insults, the aggressive search, the baseless accusations. He mentioned he was a Marine veteran. He mentioned his uniform. He mentioned the humiliation. The Civilian Review Board, already under pressure from the viral video and calls from various civil rights groups, moved with uncharacteristic speed. Citing significant public interest and the gravity of the allegations, especially concerning a veteran, they formally requested all materials related to the stop, including, crucially, the full, unedited body camera footage from both Officer Reed and Officer Nguin. This was the call Officer Reed and the department hadn't expected to have such far-reaching consequences. Body cam footage was often a double-edged sword. Reed had likely assumed that, if it ever came out, it would show a by-the-book stop, his words carefully chosen, Green uncooperative in some subtle way. He hadn't counted on the clarity of modern microphones or the unblinking gaze of the lens capturing every nuance of his disdain. When the board ordered the release of the footage to the public, another unprecedented move attributed to the intense scrutiny, it was devastating. Reed's body cam, in particular, was a damning indictment. It captured every derogatory comment, every sneering remark about old soldiers and welfare cheats. It showed Hal's polite, measured responses. It showed Reed's escalating aggression, his hand drifting towards his weapon. It showed him throwing Hal's wallet on the hood. And critically, it showed Officer Nguin, standing by, his discomfort visible in fleeting glances and shifts of weight, but ultimately silent, a passive accomplice. The raw footage was far more visceral than the bystander's video. You heard Reed's contempt crystal clear. You saw Hal's quiet dignity in the face of it. The online outrage, already simmering, boiled over. Veterans groups issued scathing condemnations. Local politicians, sensing the shift in public mood, began to make forceful statements. Under the white-hot glare of public pressure, the Northwood Police Department had no choice. Chief Miller, his face grim at a hastily convened press conference, announced Officer Reed's immediate suspension pending a full disciplinary hearing. He also announced that the department was fast-tracking a series of reforms, including enhanced de-escalation and implicit bias training. Officer Nguin was placed on administrative desk duty. For a moment, it felt like a victory. The system, prodded by one man's courage and a single, crucial call to the right place, seemed to be working. Hal felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time. A tentative, fragile hope. The initial elation was short-lived. Reed's suspension felt like a win, but the disciplinary process quickly bogged down. The powerful police union flexed its muscle, filing grievances, alleging a rush to judgment, and demanding Reed's full reinstatement. They painted him as a dedicated officer being made a scapegoat for political expediency. The promised departmental reforms seemed to move at a glacial pace, mired in committee meetings and budget debates. "This is how it works, Hal," Marissa said, her voice tinged with a weary frustration they both shared. "They count on us getting tired, getting distracted. They count on the outrage fading." But Hal wasn't the same man he was a few weeks ago. The humiliation, once a source of shame, had transmuted into a quiet, burning resolve. He wouldn't be silenced. He wouldn't let them sweep this under the rug. The city council announced a special hearing on police-community relations. Hal, at Marissa's urging, and with a newfound sense of purpose, agreed to testify. The council chamber was packed. Media cameras lined the back wall. Activists held signs. Uniformed officers stood stoically along the sides. When Hal's name was called, a hush fell over the room. He walked to the podium, his old Marine jacket feeling less like a shield now, and more like a banner. He didn't shout. He didn't recriminate. He simply told his story. "My name is Hal Green," he began, his voice steady, resonating through the chamber. "I served 12 years in the United States Marine Corps. I fought for this country, for the freedoms we all cherish. I came home with scars, visible and invisible, but I came home proud to have served." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the faces in the room. The council members, the chief of police, the citizens. "A few weeks ago, my car broke down, and for that, I was treated like a criminal. I was insulted, demeaned, and publicly humiliated by officers of the Northwood Police Department. They called me an old soldier, a welfare cheat. They searched me on the lawn of a stranger's home as if I were less than human." He spoke of his PTSD not as an excuse but as a context. "For veterans like me, interactions with authority can be triggering. We're trained to respect authority, to comply. But that respect must be earned. It must be mutual. When it's not, when that trust is broken, the damage is profound." He then broadened his perspective. "This isn't just about me. I'm a black man in America. What happened to me is not an isolated incident. It's a symptom of a deeper problem. It's the lived reality for too many people in our community, especially people of color. We are tired of being seen as threats, not citizens. We are tired of being presumed guilty." His words, delivered with a quiet dignity that belied the anger and pain beneath, landed with palpable force. He wasn't just Hal Green, the victim of a bad stop. He was a veteran, a citizen, a black man demanding to be seen, to be heard, to be respected. One by one, other community members came forward, their voices joining Hal's. A mother whose son was stopped and frisked walking home from basketball practice. An elderly man who felt intimidated by officers in his own neighborhood. a young woman who'd been dismissed and disbelieved when she tried to report a crime. The stories painted a picture of a community fractured by distrust and fear. By the end of the hearing, the atmosphere in the chamber was electric. The council members, visibly moved and under immense pressure, pledged immediate action. They promised to fully fund and implement the bias training, to strengthen the Civilian Review Board's authority, and, significantly, to establish a dedicated mental health liaison program for veterans interacting with law enforcement, a program designed to provide understanding and support, not suspicion and hostility. Hal left the hearing feeling drained but also strangely lighter. He had spoken his truth not just for himself, but for all those who couldn't or wouldn't be heard. He had faced the system, and for a brief, powerful moment, he had made it listen. The fallout from the hearing and the sustained public pressure was undeniable. Officer Reed's disciplinary hearing concluded not with the reinstatement his union had fought for, but with a formal reprimand, the revocation of his eligibility for promotion for 5 years, mandatory retraining in de-escalation, cultural sensitivity, and implicit bias, and, perhaps most galling for him, 200 hours of community service, to be served with a veterans support organization. His career, once on a fast track, was irrevocably damaged. It wasn't the complete termination many had hoped for, but it was a significant blow, a clear message that his conduct was unacceptable. Officer Nguin, to his credit, had shown remorse during his own internal review. He had spoken, haltingly at first, then with growing conviction, about his discomfort during the stop, his regret at not intervening. He acknowledged his complicity. He wasn't just going through the motions. Something in Hal's dignity, in the public outcry, had genuinely reached him. He voluntarily requested to be part of the new Veterans Liaison Program, wanting to learn, to understand, and to help bridge the gap he had helped widen. His superiors, seeing a chance for genuine restorative action, approved his request, alongside mandatory retraining. For Hal, justice still felt incomplete. Reed was still a cop. The system that allowed him to act with impunity for so long was still largely intact. But something had shifted, both within himself and within the community. He had found his voice, a voice he hadn't realized was so powerful. The experience, traumatic as it was, had ignited a fire in him. Marissa, ever perceptive, saw it. "You know, Hal," she said one afternoon, "my little nonprofit is always looking for good people. People who understand the struggle, who can connect with folks who've been through it. Especially veterans of color." Hal looked at her, a slow smile spreading across his face. The construction work paid the bills, but it didn't feed his soul. This felt like purpose. "You think an old soldier like me could make a difference?" he asked, a twinkle in his eye, reclaiming Reed's insult and turning it into a badge of honor. "I think," Marissa said, her smile matching his. "You already have." Hal Green joined Marissa's community advocacy group, focusing on supporting veterans of color navigate the VA system, access mental health resources, and understand their civil rights. He shared his story, not as a tale of victimhood, but as a testament to resilience and the power of speaking out. He helped others find their voices. The city of Northwood didn't transform overnight. Trust, once shattered, is painstakingly rebuilt, piece by piece. The new training programs were implemented, some officers grumbling, others embracing the chance to learn. The Veterans Liaison Program, with a surprisingly dedicated Officer Nguin playing a key role, began to make inroads, offering a different kind of interaction between police and former service members. There were more conversations, more community meetings. The Civilian Review Board, emboldened, took on more cases with greater rigor. Change was slow, incremental, often frustrating. But it was happening. One conversation, one policy change, one person like Hal Green deciding that silence was no longer an option. The humiliation he endured that night on a wealthy suburban lawn had, in a way he could never have predicted, become a catalyst, not just for his own healing, but for the slow, arduous healing of a community. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, Harold Green felt like he was on the front lines of a battle worth fighting, armed not with a rifle but with his story, his dignity, and an unshakable belief in the possibility of a more just world. Systemic injustice doesn't flourish in the shadows. It thrives when we remain silent. Hal's ordeal, The raw humiliation of a man who served his country only to be degraded on its streets reminds us that every individual, regardless of race, background, or economic status, deserves dignity, respect, and accountability from those who swear an oath to serve and protect. The story of Hal Green, Officer Reed, and Officer Nguin is not just a headline. It's a mirror reflecting the cracks in our own communities. True change, lasting change, doesn't arrive like a thunderclap. It unfolds when communities demand transparency, when individuals find the courage to speak their truth, when we stand in solidarity with those who are wronged, and when we collectively transform outrage into sustained, meaningful action. Let us honor Hal's courage not with fleeting anger, but with a commitment to continue listening to the stories that make us uncomfortable, to learn from the experiences of others, and to work together, one conversation, one policy change, one election at a time, toward a society where no one is humiliated for who they are or where they come from. What role will you play in building that society? Harold Green didn't ask for a fight, but when injustice came, he stood up. If this story struck you, smash like, share this truth, and subscribe for more narratives that confront power, not just comfort. These stories matter. Let's make sure they're seen.